welcome back to Alabama Gristmill. We've got some fun story here for you today. A little bit on a more less serious side, more of a fun little anecdote about the way people lived and some special, I guess, retreats that were really popular in Alabama in the early 1800s, early to mid 1800s. But first, I want to welcome my co-host, Donna Causey. Say hello.
Hi.
And,
We're here.
And as usual, I would like to mention all these stories are available in the Alabama Footprints book series that you can find on Amazon.com. They are just basically, how many volumes do you have out there now?
We have 8 volumes. The first 4 have been combined into one big book, if you want to get it that way. But there's 8 different volumes on different categories.
And different eras too, right?
Yeah, different eras. They're just stories you don't normally find in textbooks and history books, and they're short little vignettes about history. A lot of them are, and a lot of them contain original records and court documents from the 1800s, the actual words that some of the Native Americans spoke in their peace treaties and things like that. So
I like to think it's also a little bit about the it's kind of like a Reader's Digest version of Alabama history, so it's real simple, real easy to read.
Not like typical history books that are longer. You know, these are things that you can just kind of pick up and learn a little bit extra something that you didn't know before about a place you down the street, maybe. You know?
Absolutely. And like in this story is one of the stories that you'll find in there. And we also have you'll see some pictures in there as well. And some documentation that, backs up the story that we're talking about, the actual, wills or deeds or various references that the stories are based on. So, yeah,
that's what I was going to say. We have a lot of old pictures from the archives and so forth on the website, alabamapioneers.com. That's fun to look at too.
Well, let's go ahead and get into the story. And the story, I'll let you go ahead and lead it off here about popular things to do in the South in the early 1800s.
Yeah, in the early 1800s, today we're looking for places down in Florida and all that, but you couldn't get very far off. I mean, you had to kind of depend on trains and things like that to get around when they came into existence. And people the South is hot. So
very much so.
And they didn't have air conditioning. You had to remember that too. So
it's like as in Matthew Broderick movie, they said in Biloxi Blue, in the South, it's Africa hot.
Never got this hot in Brooklyn. It's like Africa hot. Tarzan couldn't take this kind of hot.
Not just hot, it's Africa hot.
It is. It feels like you got a wet blanket on sometimes from the humidity, too. So they start going to the mountains like we do. We go to the mountains to try to cool off. What they started discovering, too, is these mineral springs, which are actually sulfur springs that they thought were good for your health. You got to remember, too, we had a lot of mosquitoes. We had yellow fever. We had typhoid going on.
Bunch of mosquitoes in Alabama?
Oh, no. Yeah. Well, anyway, the people would head to the mountains and try to find a place. And so some of these enterprising people came along, decided to put some hotels up. And one famous one was built at Blount Springs, 28 miles north of Birmingham. Long before then, that area was used as a meeting place for the Cherokee and the Creek Indians. It was kind of a meeting place for quite a few centuries, probably, because it's so beautiful up there. The hotels and all that are gone now.
We're not talking small hotels either. These are full-fledged resorts. I mean, I've seen the pictures of this as well, and it's just amazing at the level of luxury, and the size alone was just surprising when I first saw them.
There were a couple of antebellum hotels there before 1872, but Jackson built a beautiful resort. It was huge, and it attracted people from all over the South, not just Alabama. From Alabama, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, New York, and they started...
that was because of that rail line, I think, was put in there. Once that happened, it made it really convenient to get to. Yeah,
that was the place to go. It was just 28 miles north of Birmingham, so it was a place to go, if you wanted to go have a nice little weekend and get away from the heat in the city and the disease sometimes that was going on, like yellow fever, that they didn't know what was causing it. But that was around 1872 when Jackson built that beautiful hotel. You can imagine the nights they had. They had orchestras and concerts that played until midnight. They even got so famous they bottled their own sulfur water in blue bottles and served it on the train trip going up there. And you can find a few of those blue bottles around once in a while.
I know you said Jackson built the hotel, but there's one name involved that I think everybody from at least the Birmingham area will recognize. Somebody bought the hotel, right?
Right. Sloss, James James Sloss and his brother Max Sloss. James was the founder of the Sloss Furnace in Birmingham. And so they owned it. They bought it in 1887. And he renamed the hotel the Blount Springs Hotel at that point. And it really boomed then. I mean,
there's some beautiful pictures of that hotel on the website, and we'll also link them in the notes of the podcast as well.
It was the place to be, and it kept going until the 1930s, pretty strong. Well, another attraction there was the Bangor Cave that was close by, and it became, at that time, gambling was legal at resorts and spas like they had, and so they had a nice little gambling nightclub in the cave on Jackson Mountain. Less than a mile from there was the horse racing, so you could have a really, really nice time up at Blount Springs.
Yeah, there's a big history. There's some big history on that Bangor Cave. I mean, we'll probably have our own episode of the podcast about it. I mean, it was a really fascinating little story behind it.
It's owned privately now, and so the man is trying to restore it to some extent. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with it right now. It was a nice place to visit. What was interesting, the funny part of this gets into the celebrities, some of the people that came to visit, and one of the actresses, really famous actresses of the day, was Lillian Russell, and she came for an extended visit one summer, and she caused quite a stir because she was having some sunbathing going on, but she didn't know about the chigger bite that you get from doing things like that in the mountains. If you lived in Alabama anytime, you know what a chigger bite is, and it can be miserable.
Big time. So Lillian Russell was a big actress in the day. I mean, it'd be like having, your top actresses of Julia Roberts or your
later on Marilyn Monroe. Yes,
Monroe. I mean, they're a top level actress.
Her friend who came with her was Diamond Jim Brady. He was a New York he owned a lot of restaurants up in New York too, and he was famous. He came along for the trip. What happened to her was she got all those chigger bites after sunbathing, and they were trying to appease her, so they got every ounce of butter in the town and the surrounding countryside trying to cover her so she could just manage to sleep. Must have been pretty miserable.
Perks of being a celebrity. Everybody trying to help you out.
You got to get everybody in town to help. And Teddy Roosevelt even made an appearance once there. Senators and anybody running for office showed up there. Anyway, sadly, in 1915, a fire destroyed the two main hotels, and the L&N line closed, and so Blount Springs just kind of was forgotten. After that was the wartime. Things changed in society, so spas were not quite as popular after that.
Well, I imagine at some point, I guess 1914, but later on in the 30s and 40s and 50s, once they started developing air conditioning, people started being able to vacation down at the coast and all that where it was really hot, and they just stay inside.
And cars came along at that time, so you weren't so dependent on just where the train took you. You could go out further and branch out to other areas. And when a fire destroys the main livelihood, it just kind of dropped off. So
and too expensive to rebuild and all that. So I'd imagine that would pretty much be devastating to any type of community or resort location.
The former mayor of Mel Drennan, he's the former mayor of Birmingham. He owned Blount Springs for a time after that, but his nephew, Jim Tullis, kind of took it over, and they're developing it now. They're realizing the importance of it and creating some homes out there. The village of Blount Springs has opened up a 450-acre community around Blue Hole Lake. It's still a beautiful place to live, and it's not that far from Birmingham. You might see in the woods here and there little stone places or little trails where the old hotels and resort was. It's kind of like you would think of going to a spa today. It had all the special treatment because you got to remember the mineral springs where they thought that would cure you if you had consumption or, different things going on. They thought that was a way to get well. So they were really popular. Way to relieve the stress back in those days.
So absolutely. And I think I've even seen some pictures of people, that have gone out and looked and found like you said, you can go out in the woods there and you can see the footings and the different locations of the different the main hotel in the area. So you just see that bit of history there. I don't know. It's probably not public land at this point, being they're developing it for the village of Blount Springs, but it was just fascinating to see.
Yeah, I imagine those people that are living up there, they'll occasionally might run across a few of those blue bottles, that have the Blount Springs Hotel on it. You can find them from time to time. But I can't imagine just sitting in the woods, listening to concerts and orchestras and all this. Really having a good time in the summer months.
Another hidden place in Alabama that's kind of forgotten about, but it was a premier place in its heyday. So it's kind of interesting to see that type of a luxury resort in the state at that early of a time.
Franklin Roosevelt really was a big one. He visited Warm Springs in Georgia for his hot spring soak. And during that time, it kind of went up again because he would go visit these mineral springs like that. And then people thought, well, maybe it'll help me too. But when you don't know what to do for your health and you don't understand what's causing you to get yellow fever, you try most anything, I imagine, too.
I imagine you do, yeah. I mean, you didn't quite be able to go down to the doctor in his office in the pharmacy and go to the Walgreens and get the medicine. So you had to kind of go to the spa.
I look back at some of the Birmingham News articles, and over again you see, so-and-so, the leading people in the state went to Blount Springs. So it must have been, they even called it the Saratoga of the South because it was so fancy and so important. They really served you well.
Absolutely. Well, it's always fun to hear those stories about a lost, forgotten area, especially the Lillian Russell celebrity taking up all the butter in the town. So that's kind of fascinating. But I
don't think that would have helped an awful lot, though. Chigger bites you can't get rid of. Have you ever had many chigger bites, Michael?
Yes, absolutely.
I know you've had some because. But
for the listeners out there, have you heard of any better solutions for the chigger bites than butter?
Yeah. The best one I've heard of is fingernail polish. You cover it with fingernail.
Gotcha.
You kill it that way, or something like that. They say you can't get oxygen, but that's what I always heard, and it seemed to work. I don't know. People may have other ideas about chigger bites and how to get rid. There's so many. There's so many of them.
If so, put them in the comments so we can kind of see what the popular choice is in case we run across a chigger bite.
Yeah, you still have them today.
Exactly. You still get them. They're still out there if you're out there in the woods. So
yeah, if you spend a day in the woods, you're generally going to come back with one or two here and there.
Absolutely.
They itch. So I can't imagine what she went through.
Well, all right. We'll wrap this one up. And as usual, check us out on AlabamaPioneers.com. You can post comments there and also send emails to info@AlabamaPioneers.com. But that's all for this week's Alabama Gristmill episode. And we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
And I guess
and see you next week. Next time.
We'll let Red Foley play this one out with the Alabama Jubilee.
One-legged Joe dancing round on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go home.